What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Talk of the Tundra, your Green Bay Packers podcast that is a proud partner of the Eurostep Podcast Network and the Blue Wire family. As always, I am your host, Numac, and joining me to talk about today's 53-man roster cutdown, where Jordan saw his standship come to an end. Obviously, is my lovely co-host Jordan Tresky. Jordan, how are you doing, buddy?
Hello, hello.
Oh yeah, Anders
Hola.
Carlson isn't a Packer anymore. That was very bad. But yeah,
Yeah,
how you doing?
do good. Very eventful cut down day, as it always is. Cut down day, just like the corn stalks, sweat it up in the state of Wisconsin. The
That's a weather
Packers,
joke.
that's a weather joke. All those Mets out there. We're doing a lot of inside baseball.
A lot of
This is
inside baseball in the first
this is
minute.
going big in the inside baseball community. Anyway, yeah, eventful cutdown day and a lot to get into. So I'm just gonna stop talking so we can get into it.
Yep. Biggest news out of the day is AJ Dillon not making the roster. Put on injured reserve with no designation to return, meaning his season is done for, at least with the Packers. I believe I saw Andy Herman talk about how if they reach a settlement with AJ Dillon, he cannot re-sign with the Packers at all this season, as well as can't sign um, anywhere else for like 6 weeks, I believe. But he can play the season again if they do reach a settlement. But um, looks like AJ Dillon's career in Green Bay might be over with this injury designation. Two stingers in 9 months for him, not ideal for sure. Turns out that stinger was more of a problem than we were led on to believe, coming out of the second preseason game and that week of practice. So, um, it sucks to see his time like this end in Green Bay. Like it, I'm not trying to be happy about the situation, given my alliances and my allegiances rather to other players. But I think the running back room is better because of this, in my opinion. Like I just think Josh Jacobs, obviously the starter, and then with Emanuel Wilson and MarShawn Lloyd behind him, is a better running back room than if they were going to trot out AJ Dillon again this year. But it for all intents and purposes, it does stink that it's kind of a ho hum end to AJ Dillon's career. Um, likely end AJ Dillon's career here in Green Bay.
Yeah, I think there's two ways to go about it. I think you can feel for AJ Dillon the person,
A thousand
clearly.
percent, 1,000%.
This is not just his time in Green Bay ending because obviously, as we have talked about plenty, he's on a 1 year contract. So even if that might get expedited if he has an injury settlement and gets released. But two neck related injuries in the matter of 9, 10 months, not great, even in the sport of football. Um,
Not
yeah,
at all, some might
that's,
say.
yeah. So there's that part of it. There's also obviously the objective part of what his performance had been like. Obviously, we had talked at length. We even talked a couple weeks ago whether he'd even make the final roster. I think when we had that discussion, obviously this is before he even got hurt in practice. So all the naysayers or whatever he was saying, like that literally is like the last statement that he makes as a Packer. And I don't know, I get being having followed sports for this long and all this stuff, it's like this comes every year, and fans like we'll get into other players because there are certainly some gloating of players not making the final roster or anything like that. But you still want someone to prove you wrong, even if you don't feel like he's like a starting caliber player, this difference maker, whatever designation you want to put on AJ Dillon or someone of anybody. You just want to give them a chance to do it to prove that they can play better than expectations and stuff like that. So I think
Mm-hmm.
that for me, it's you lose a character that obviously embraced being in Green Bay, was one of the more veteran minded players on this roster, which we'll get into the entire roster, but they're actually younger than they were going into the season than last year, which is kind of remarkable.
It's insane.
Uh, it's insane. It probably also just speaks to, again, they had so many draft picks.
Yeah, and the
Um,
fact that like they lost Devondre Campbell and they replaced him with two rookies,
yep.
and obviously AJ Dillon is now gone, and they replace
Yeah.
him with two young guys. One of them being a rookie.
A rookie and a second year guy.
Right.
Yeah. So yeah, I think for again, just ultimately, this is bigger than football, bigger than ball. Um, and you just hope that AJ Dillon has a chance to actually continue his playing career, doing what he loves, and all that stuff. Because at this point, it's out of our hands of what comes next. And obviously, the same goes for him because he's the one most affected by it. And I think the Packers, they gave him every opportunity to try to be an difference maker on this team, but now intervening forces have intervened.
That's right. That's right. But yeah, it does suck as for the person AJ Dillon, someone who always represented the Packers well, someone who always kind of took being a Packer to heart and wanted the best for the Packers always and just the area. Obviously, the mayor of Door County thing gets memed quite a bit by you and I both, admittedly as well. But couldn't have asked for a better champion of the city and just the area in general in AJ Dillon. It sucks that his play wasn't able to back that up and that his time in Green Bay likely ends like this. Um, but yeah, it's the circumstances of football. Injuries happen. Play doesn't live up to it, et cetera, et cetera. So, um, going to the good news, Emanuel Wilson is on the 53-man roster, Jordan.
Yes,
Likely as RB2 to start the year. Uh,
yes,
I am elated. I'm very happy
as it should be.
to see this. Uh, I was just impressed with him all last year for the preseason. The couple of runs where he really showed out last year in the regular season before he got hurt, and then he did everything he was supposed to this preseason to make the team. And he ends up doing that along with MarShawn Lloyd, who's still nursing his hamstring injury. And we'll find out more about that tomorrow on Wednesday once they start practicing again, and we'll likely get a injury report, or we'll know whether or not Marshawn Lloyd is practicing. Um, but if he's not, I think that for all intents and purposes, Emmanuel Wilson will be running back two going into Sao Paulo down in Brazil against the Eagles week one.
Yeah, again, I think the big thing, not this, I'm not saying this just specifically right after the Emmanuel Wilson stuff, but it is the initial roster.
Yeah,
There will be changes. There are, we'll get into each position group or at least the counts of them, but
yeah.
things are still fluid. Things are, I, I have not even looked at every other team. Not that I will, but I will.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, what were you gonna say?
I'll say, looking at other teams, this is just like a note from last year. Patrick Taylor makes the 49ers 53-man roster his first time making the full team in 5 years. And then Tyler Goodson made the Colts 53-man roster down in Indianapolis. So, like, good on both of those former Packers making the best of their situations after having not intermittent, but like varied success with the Packers over their years. And so, like, congrats to them for making it. Not that they'll ever hear this, but it's cool to see those guys that we were keeping an eye on last year and in prior years make the team elsewhere.
Yeah, I think that's part of it. It's kind of, you can kind of relate that to Emmanuel Wilson, who we talked about last year being this preseason dynamo, um, and gets hurt before he just as he was starting to get his chance to kind of flourish in the regular season. Now with AJ Dillon, you know, on IR, still Packer ceremonially right now, but Emmanuel Wilson has the opportunity to spell Josh Jacobs. And again, I think it wasn't as flashy as last year, but it was still a strong preseason. He's clearly a talented player, and And that's not to denigrate MarShawn Lloyd. It's specifically about Emanuel Wilson right now going in the start of the season. He has the runway is there, save for Lloyd, and obviously injuries, hampered his start to the season. It'll be interesting to watch him specifically, once the year gets started, because if you have a couple knocks or bruises or anything like that going into the year, it can just linger on throughout the season, and
Yeah,
it's
that
never that good.
yeah, that's kind of where I came from, saying like to start the season, I think he is running back too, because we haven't seen Marshawn Lloyd in practice in a couple weeks or however long it's been, at least.
Yeah.
Or he got hurt. He hurt in the Browns game, right?
Yep.
Yeah, so it's been at least 2 weeks. Um, and so whenever he begins his ramp up towards practicing again, I don't think they're going to rush him back to really be ready to be a full time spell of Josh Jacobs. Like I think that's why Emanuel Wilson, this is his job to keep through the first few, probably the first month of the season. And that is to say, like, all of my optimism about Emanuel Wilson isn't to unseat Josh Jacobs, right? That was never my plan or my big aspiration. It was more
Yeah.
so you have Josh Jacobs, who's an explosive back, who's going to be the bell cow for this offense. But on the other side, like on the other hand, you have another really good, purposefully running back in Emmanuel Wilson to go in there with some juice when Josh Jacobs needs to take a rest for a series or a couple plays. Like that was the biggest issue we had with AJ Dillon, right? Is that
Yeah.
well, one of the biggest issues we had with him is that when Aaron Jones would come out, he'd come in for a couple plays and it wasn't really effective running. It was a yard or two here and there, but you never saw him break away like Emmanuel Wilson did a couple times last year, and obviously in the preseason these past 2 years. AJ Dillon never did that like Emanuel Wilson did, save for that Titans game back in his rookie year. But that's a long time ago, and he hasn't really shown that the past couple of years. So if he can just come in and provide positive offense for 5, 6 carries, maybe a catch out of the backfield during the game, and be an effective pass blocker, I think obviously that last point is going to be the biggest one, and how often he plays in Matt LaFleur's offense. If he can do all that, he's gonna be an effective player and a more effective player than AJ Dillon was. And however long it takes for Marshawn Lloyd to get his chance, because obviously they invested a high draft pick into him, not high, but a mid round draft pick into him, he's going to get his chances. It depending on how long that takes for him to get acclimated to NFL pace and to be a surefire player. Who knows how long Emmanuel Wilson will have the running back two job? But I think like I see it as Josh Jacobs RB1, obviously running back by committee for the running back two spot.
Yeah. And ultimately, this is a running back room that is largely, even though Emmanuel Wilson was on the team last year, as we mentioned, he didn't get many touches. So this
Right.
is a completely changed
Yeah.
running back room.
Yep.
So yeah, new flavors indeed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm excited about that. So, but um, moving on a little bit to your muse, Jordan. Anders Carlson does not make the team. The Packers decide for the moment to go with Greg Joseph at the kicking position. I did just have Andy Herman's camp totals for the kicker battle, but I have since clicked off of that tab. So, but regardless, why don't you talk a little bit about your boy?
Actually, I
You
have
have
it.
them? Perfect. Thank you.
Uh, Let me see. This is from Matt Schneidman. His totals were Anders Carlson was 81.3%, so 61 of 75. And Greg Joseph was 58 of 74 this summer.
I think that's pre Ravens game. I think Joseph was 60 of 75 and Carlson was 62 of 70, or I think 76 was the total. Here, I have it on my phone. I have it here. Anders Carlson, 62 of 76, 81.6%. Greg Joseph, 60 of 76, 78.9%. Um, I think my biggest thing with this is that the kicks from Joseph just looked better going through the uprights, which I know you had a reaction to in our last podcast. but that might be the case. Like, I think Anders Carlson needed to really show some large improvement to beat out Greg Joseph, a kicker who has kicked in the NFL before and had, I'll say, varied success at the NFL level, but still has had a longer track of success than Anders Carlson had. And Anders just flat out didn't show out in camp this summer.
No, he. I can admit defeat. I thought this is all moot. I still thought the Packers were going to, specifically Brian Gutekunst was going to live with developmental mistakes, ups and downs, or whatever you want to call it. No, not with your kicker.
Nope.
So yeah, Anders Carlson doesn't make it. It'll be very interesting to see where he goes if he gets another job during the season. Obviously, kicking injuries do happen, and I don't know if he's be high on many people's list, but he's still, I would imagine, an NFL quality kicker. But this, it could very well be, this is just what happened with his brother, Daniel Carlson. He got waived by the Vikings after they drafted him after more, I would say, probably more explosive flame out. Like he missed kicks during games, like difference making kicks. I know Anders did too, but I'm just saying, like, it was after, it wasn't losing out in a training camp battle, which you could argue is worse because he didn't even have a chance to start the season. But the Vikings made a very rash decision, um, and cut him, and now he's in Las Vegas and is one of the better kickers in the league. I It's all fool's gold, and really, like, it is,
I I don't disagree.
it is. I just think for me, judging by the reaction, because this, what was more remarkable is it was like 8:45 in the morning
Yeah, he
that
was like
this came through.
one of the first couple. Samari Toure was the first guy cut, and then not too long after that is Anders Carlson.
We had probably 10 to 12, maybe 13 guys that we knew ahead of the 3 p.m. cutoff day or date, time, whatever you want to call it. Anders Carlson was like third or fourth, which shows you that, not that it's they're learning on Twitter, or hopefully not, because that would be incredibly
That would suck
irresponsible and terrible.
regardless.
Yes. But it just shows you how definitive that decision was
Yeah.
made.
He
And
was third. Samari Toure, Caleb Jones, and then Anders.
so for me, I think, I don't know if he'll have the opportunity to like rue the day that the Packers, they'll rue the day that they got rid of me. I just think the Packers are just not. This is going to be the start of this chase. I don't think Greg Joseph is it. It's very matched even. If you look at some reporters, whether if you want to source it or aggregate it, whatever you want to call it, there's some Packers beat reporters that still believe that the week one or opening day kicker might not still be on the roster, which I think is more of a problem than anything. It's not about who gets to the initial roster right now.
Yeah.
If that is a belief within that team, within that organization, then that's a problem.
Yeah.
That's a big problem.
Yeah.
So
I'd agree with that.
so I think that is where I'm just kind of falling on that. You know what I mean? I
Yeah.
just think it's more of an indictment. It's not an indictment of Anders specifically, although he had plenty of opportunity to make the 53-man roster, and it could have been that kick in the Ravens game that kind of sealed his fate.
Yeah, the 32
But
missing 32 is just, as a layperson and a regular man, missing from 32 is unacceptable from an NFL kicker. Like, it's, you just can't be missing kicks that close in the middle of summer. Like, you just can't when it's a beautiful day outside, no wind, no weather, no nothing. You just
yeah,
can't miss from 32. It's just that's not gonna fly during the regular season.
yeah. So yeah, that is just my biggest worry right now, is that, do they how comfortable is this truly how cushy is Greg Joseph's seat? Because if it's that he falters in a game or he misses a couple of kicks or they're disappointed with his performance, like
Yeah.
what is the standard that they're trying to chase? Because trying to make this dance throughout the season um, opens the door for a lot of shenanigans. Because memory serves, the Packers have not made a lot of good special teams choices in a long time.
I mean, what, like Daniel Whalen's like the one?
Daniel Whalen is the one right now. Keyshawn Nixon being the returner, but turning into something bigger
Bigger than that. Yeah.
is another exception. But
Before
between the long
that,
snappers,
yeah.
between drafting Anders Carlson,
Drafting J.K. Scott.
J.K. Scott, Hunter Bradley, I forgot that he was a
Yep.
special teams draft pick that Bradley could speak. Like this is just the sore spot.
Yeah.
It's how we talked about it in years past, but now it's like you're trying to get the finer touches on your roster, and you don't really have a pulse on who's your kicker. I think that is very concerning.
Oh, absolutely. Um, I'm not sure I buy into the Joseph is the kicker today, maybe not tomorrow mindset of it. Like, I think kickers are um one of the positions where you kind of just roll with what you have versus who's on the cut line. Like if you're cutting a kicker on cut down day, he's probably not very good or has a history of not being very good. And so I think you just roll with what you have and what you took through camp, that being Greg Joseph, and let the season play out at least for a couple weeks, right? If Greg
Yeah.
Joseph is so bad that they need to move on from him after 4 or 5 weeks, then so be it, right? But I don't think you you change that horse right now. Like I just think
No, I don't think so
that's a
either. I think
fool's errand.
it is again. I think that yes, it's a fool's errand if that is, and it only begs the question for if how how much will they stick with Greg Joseph, you know, being the kicker if he goes down the route of Anders Carlson or if he has two kicks missed in a game or whatever. He's again, he has a better track record. Anders Carlson has just 1 year of experience under his belt, but it wasn't enough to win the job going into a second season. That's big. So yeah, we'll see, and it could just be a matter of they want the most veteran, experienced kicker that they could have gotten during the offseason, and they just want him in for a team that they feel like is going to compete for not just a division title, but hopefully deeper in the playoffs. And you know, we'll see starting next Friday.
That's right. That's right. Um. All right, Jordan. Should we move on to the? Oh, we got another bit of news before we move on to the full draft class. Um. I guess let's start with the full draft class, or not draft class. My apologies. The full roster cut down. That was two flubs in a row in that one. The full roster cut down, and then we'll jump into this first bit of news as we go there. Does that sound good?
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Let's do it.
So making the team at quarterback is obviously Jordan Love, and the Packers' recent trade acquisition, former Titans quarterback Malik Willis. Malik Willis was a mid-round pick last year for the Titans. I forget where he was picked.
2022, I believe he was. I want to say he was fifth,
In the third round for the in the 2022
third
draft.
round.
Yep. I think he was rumored at some point to go like super high in that draft, but I think that was a lot of smoke and mirrors.
That could have been it. Also, that if anybody has seen that quarterback draft from that specific
That's the Kenny
years,
Pickett draft, right?
Kenny Pickett, Desmond Ritter,
Yeah.
um, let's see, Matt Corral,
Yeah, it's not good.
Bailey Zappi, Sam Howell,
Yeah.
Skylar Thompson. The two quarterbacks that are still with their drafted team right now are Skylar Thompson, the seventh round pick for the Dolphins, and of course Brock Purdy, the last pick in the draft, and
Yeah,
obviously starting for the
not a
49ers.
not a good draft for that. But the Packers trade a seventh round pick next year for Malik Willis. He is still taking his physical, so it's not finalized yet. But as such, the Packers cut both Michael Pratt and Sean Clifford as well. Um, I believe they're trying to get both of them onto the practice squad, if not at least Sean Clifford, according to reporting from Bill Huber. With I forget who he's with SI, I believe he's with now.
Packers Central. They're
Packers Central. Yep.
yeah.
Um, he reported that the likely scenario is that should Sean Clifford, and if not Sean Clifford, then Michael Pratt, I'd imagine, makes it through to the practice squad, they would elevate Sean Clifford from the practice squad for the first couple weeks of the season, whether that's just week 1 or just week 2, as Malik Willis learns the playbook and things like that. So I think your depth chart would look like Jordan Love, Sean Clifford, Malik Willis, break glass in case of emergency kind of thing. So, um, Malik Willis, dual threat kind of guy, very different sort of quarterback from what Jordan Love is. Definitely a guy who likes to run and didn't have the best throwing stats in his couple of starts with the Titans. Obviously, they went and drafted Will Levis last year and not didn't move on from him right away per se, but what they drafted Levis in the early second round last year after he'd fallen out of the
Yep.
first. So, uh, yeah,
Mason Rudolph, who I realized was the Tennessee Titan, beat out Willis for the backup job too.
there you go.
So
So noted great quarterback Mason Rudolph.
assault.
Assault. um, but yeah, I don't really have anything else to say to that. I think Sean Clifford and Michael Pratt both getting cut kind of feels right. That neither one really impressed all the way through camp. Obviously, maybe Tom Clements can work Malik Willis into something more tangible for a backup quarterback, but in the reality of such, as we talk about all these end of bench guys, uh, if any of them are seeing the field in meaningful minutes, something likely has gone wrong for the Packers, and it won't matter much anyways.
Yeah, that my thoughts completely. Um, it's an interesting flyer. 2025 seventh round pick. Whether you believe that they could have gotten anybody worth a note of off of waivers, I think they were from uh, Packers Twitter that I saw was Packers ranked 25th in the waiver wire, so it's not like they had a high chance of getting like a Bailey Zappi who's already lost his job or whatever. So I think, and considering that the Packers have cut not just last year's seventh round or this year's seventh round picks going into the start of the season, but they all of their seventh round picks are gone from the 2023 draft class. So it just kind of shows you they they can part ways with the prize draft capital that they've had.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
So, okay, nothing too much else on Malik Willis. Just a trade, obviously, we had to talk about. We went through the running back room, but Nate McCrary and Elias Merriweather are cut from the roster. The wide receiver room, Christian Watson, Romeo Dobbs, Jaden Reed, Dontayvion Wicks all obviously make it, and then Bull Melton and Malik Heath are the two extra receivers they end up keeping. Grant DeBose does not make it, neither does Samari Toure. Um, Dimitri Stanley, Jalen Wayne, and Julian Hicks are all cut. There was a report earlier in the day, though, that they anticipate Julian Hicks coming back onto the practice squad should he clear waivers, though. What is your you said you predicted it on the last episode with no Grant DeBose, so I guess go off, King.
Uh it feels right. Again, this is a very crowded wide receiver room. Um it's really hard. Consistency is the king. If you can flash in a game like Grant DeBoe's high this year was probably higher in one game than Malik Heath's preseason, but Malik Heath is the more complete guy that, as we talked about last pod, he just kind of competes at a very high level. So I think that to me is kind of the biggest thing keeping him. Bob Melton, I know he's already said that this is his first time making the opening day roster. I'm just gonna call it that because initial roster just sounds so
Yeah.
it's not even celebratory at all. But yeah, that's good for him. And again, this is just a really crowded position. There are two spots really available, and even that it probably was just the one that Heath ended up winning.
Hmm.
So yeah, I like where they are there, and I think it just makes sense. And DeBose might be another guy that just sticks around the practice squad, given that he did last year too.
He might. I could see him getting a roster spot somewhere. Like wide receiver is
It's
one of
true.
those positions where a lot of teams have the guys that they like. Like a lot of the teams have these end of bench guys that just they want to hang on to. It's like
Yeah.
Samara Toure is one of them for the Packers kind of thing until obviously this year. But yeah, like if he doesn't get uh, picked up by another team, I could see him coming back on the practice squad. But I I don't know if he makes it, dude. He's a good player, and I think he has a chance to pop if he gets a chance somewhere. So we'll see. But yeah,
We shall see.
happy about Malik Heath making it. I think he brings a lot of energy to the team. Again, not that he's going to be seeing a lot of time if everyone's healthy. Same thing with Bull Melton, kind of thing. But they're good guys to have behind the other guys, essentially.
Yeah.
So, moving on to tight end. Obviously, Luke Musgrave and Tucker Kraft make it. Ben Sims makes it. He showed pretty good stuff last year in filling in for Luke Musgrave when he was out with injury. Good blocker, has some pass catching ability, so he makes it. Tyler Davis in a similar situation to AJ Dillon gets put on season-ending IR. He has a shoulder injury that was the cause for his IR designation. Um, I forget who I saw who had talked to him, but he was named a captain in one of the preseason games. That meant a lot to him. He said, so really stinks to see it like on a personal level for Tyler Davis. As a football level, I'm indifferent to the matter. Like I think the three they have are the three tight ends they should have kept in the first place. Um, but like I said, as a person, it kind of sucks to see a guy work back from an ACL injury he had last year, get healthy, have a couple, play in a couple games of preseason, and then ultimately get hurt and have your season end like that. So, Henry Pearson, Messiah Swinson, and Joel Wilson are all cut from that position as well.
Yeah, kind of. I would say probably one of the fewest surprises outside of just the injury part. Tyler Davis is given chances, but again, injury has intervened with preventing him from getting one. But yeah, I think the three tight ends are pretty lock, stock, and full of barrel or whatever that phrase is. That's not the phrase.
Lock, stock, and barrel.
Lock, stock, and roll out the barrel. Zing, zang, terrell.
Torrell. Yeah.
Terrell.
Okay. Um, anything else on Tyler Davis or no?
No, he might be one to watch of what happens with him just because he didn't get he's out for the year too, right?
Yeah, him and Dylan both got IR designation
Yeah.
or
So he's not
full
going to
IR
get
designations, not designated to return.
yeah, probably another one to keep an eye on for if he gets another shot because injuries have piled up for him at inopportune times.
Yeah, exactly. So we'll see. Offensive line. Obviously, Zach Tom, Rasheed Walker, Elton Jenkins, Jordan Morgan, and Josh Myers all make it as the starting five. The backups are as follows: Jacob Monk, Sean Ryan, Andre Dillard, Kadeem Telfort, and Travis Glover all make the team. They do end up running with 10 offensive linemen. Uh, the number I had predicted, one more the number you had. Uh, Lacina Smith, Donovan Jennings, Royce Newman, notably, Caleb Jones, and Luke Tenuta, also notably, do not make the roster. I think Donovan Jennings was a practice squad candidate, um, from what I saw reported. But yeah, Royce Newman, we are free of the Royce Newman experience at guard, Jordan.
Yes, we are. Again, probably went on too long, but that is what it is. 10, I was shocked at 10, but I understand why they went that direction.
I think they kept Glover and Telfort to see if they can make one tackle out of the both of them. Like I don't think either of them are totally a startable tackle or a backup tackle in and of themselves. So I think
That
they
could be
needed to
it.
keep an extra one to kind of be like, okay, if Telford doesn't have it this week and he needs to be in there for injury or anything like that, we'll throw out Glover and see what he has to do, and if he can get in there, and then if he doesn't work, back to Telford kind of thing. Like I think it's going to be Andre Dillard fills in as a backup for Tom or Walker when need be, and
Yeah.
then Glover and Telford will be in there in emergency situations. So, but yeah, I was surprised they cut weight with Luke Tenuta. Like I thought that was an interesting decision for them given the IR designation last year. They kept him around for the year, um, post injury and such, and then he must not have shown enough in camp. Like it, 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 it's not weird. It's just like, for example, Brenton Cox Jr. was in the same role last year, kind of thing. Like they kept him. He wasn't injured, obviously, but he didn't play much at all throughout the year because,
No, he didn't even dress mostly.
yeah, I think he might have dressed for like 1 or 2 games tops. But they kept him jumping ahead of ourselves. But then they don't keep Tenuta, which I guess, and that's the thing too, is like I don't think Brenton Cox Jr. showed a whole lot in the preseason games. At least, obviously, we weren't there every day watching camp stuff, but I feel like, I mean, like, I guess let's move on to the DN since we're already going there. Aaron Mosby, who makes the team after his show out game on against the Ravens on Saturday, makes the team, and he showed a lot more than Brenton Cox Jr. did. I think in all 3 games. I think Brenton Cox Jr. only had 1 sack, and it was like late in the Broncos game. I'm pretty sure.
I think
Um,
so.
so I liked Brenton Cox Jr. last year. I think he has an opportunity to make an impact, but it's hard to make an impact behind the 4 guys that they're going to be starting, which is Rashawn Gary, Preston Smith, Lucas Van Ness, and Kingsley Enagbare. And then obviously, like I just mentioned, Cox Jr. and Mosby make the team at defensive end as well. So it's just an interesting dynamic as to how that shook out, given all 3 of those players, Mosby, Cox, and now Tenuta. I guess to compare Tenuta and Cox, both had the same role last year. They end up not keeping Tenuta and keep Cox this year.
I think it also just comes down to Tenuta had 3 rookie offensive linemen
Yeah,
to beat out,
yeah,
you know, and versatility is a key. Like injury didn't help him last year, but if you can play multiple positions, they still have a project tackle with Telford. Jacob Monk, I think, could be an interesting kind of plug and play guy down the line.
I saw a clip today of him lining up at guard and just pancaking dudes in one of the preseason
Yeah.
games. So like, if they can keep drafting versatile offensive linemen like they do, it'll work.
And if you add in Dillard, who was not terrible when he was facing someone that's not Rashawn Gary or Press, yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
the crop of Packers edge rushers.
right.
I think that's where they're going to have these project players like a Brenton Cox Jr. or Aaron Mosby just might be the next special teams guy. But if you have use, the potential, whether it's the kind of immediate use of it or the potential, like, okay, we're going to keep this guy down the line. We think that he might fill in for a greater need or whatever. There's just probably a bigger premium on an edge rusher that they value highly, developmentally at least, versus a offensive lineman that probably could be had anywhere. You know what I mean? If he goes back to the if Tenuta or whoever else goes back to the practice squad, I think that's a bet that the Packers are willing to make, and maybe the same could be said of Brenton Cox Jr., but they did want to make that one. You know,
Yeah, understandably, I get that. So, like you said, Keyshawn Banks, Desmond Alexandre, Zach Morton, and Brevin Allen are all cut from that position. So, um, good on Aaron Mosby for making the team. Congratulations to him.
yeah.
Like, obviously, really showed out in the final preseason game against the Baltimore Ravens with the strip sack and then the interception. Um, I was always watching. Like, I rewatched some of the highlights from the Ravens game, and it's so funny to me that, and I guess jumping ahead and uh, jumping ahead and a bit of not foresight, but in the strip sack that Aaron Mosby had, he had plenty of room to pick up that ball and run with it. However, Anthony Johnson Jr. hustles through the play, picks it up, and scores a touchdown. And like that's a hustle play he probably needs to make to try and make the team. Notably doesn't. We'll get back to that later. But like it's funny to me that like in my mind, Aaron Mosby calls that fumble. There's nobody around him. I would have let him pick up that ball and score the scoop and score touchdown because he earned it. But like it was so funny to
Are
me
you
to
accusing someone of being a tryhard? Is that what you're doing right
not
now?
even like a try hard, but like it is the right thing to do. Whoever gets the ball first should pick it up and go. But they kind of got there almost simultaneously. It's like, oh come on, man, give him the scoop and score after he caused the strip sack. It's
Well,
just a funny
maybe he
little.
was punished with not winning a roster spot. Who's to say?
I think us. That's probably a little aggressive.
I would say so.
Moving on to D tackle. Obviously the main five all make it: Kenny Clark, T.J. Slayton, Devontae Wyatt, Carl Brooks, and Colby Wooden. Those are the five that make the team. Jonathan Ford gets put on IR, designated for return, as you mentioned in the last pod. Went out with an injury against the Ravens on Saturday. Good to know that he is designated for return. So I don't know when exactly that has to be by, or if it's just this season at some point, if at all. I don't know. Um, but
Let me look it up. I believe it might be.
because I know week 4 is the PUP, or no, week 5 is PUP. You have to sit out 4 weeks if you start the season on the physically unable to perform list. But I'm not entirely sure about if you have to return, if you are designated for return,
You're
for
designated for
IR.
return.
Yeah,
I don't know when it would be.
yeah. I don't think I would imagine you don't have to, but I don't know. So, regardless, Jonathan Ford on IR. But yeah, they roll with their five mainstays there at D tackle.
Yeah,
Any,
no
any,
surprises.
yeah,
No
James Esther,
surprises.
Spencer Wage, and Keontae Shaw all do not make the team.
I think this is, along with tight end, I think this is probably among the easiest ones to
Yeah,
decipher.
just chalk essentially.
Yeah, chalk.
Um, Linebackers: Quay Walker, Edgerrin Cooper, Isaiah McDuffie all make it. So does Eric Wilson and Tyron Hopper. Unfortunately, Christian Welch does not make the team. Neither does Christian Young and Chris Russell. Raylan Goforth was he designated for IR? Jordan
I think injured waived.
injured waived. Okay, so probably a settlement then is what they had,
Yeah.
or I think because he's a young player they can do that. I forget. Um, Regardless, no, does not make Christian Welch does not make the team. We kind of talked about this in the last pod, where if Tyron Hopper isn't a draft pick, Christian Welch probably makes his team. Led the team in tackles, I believe, as well as stops during the preseason. Um, is a Wisconsin native from Iola, Wisconsin. Um,
Oh, I don't think I knew that.
yep. Went to the University of Iowa and is from Iola. But sucks not to see him make it. Hopefully he goes through to the practice squad. That'd be a good keep for them. I think he's a good player as an end of the bench linebacker. Again, this is with the caveat that all these players likely will be playing that much behind, obviously, the starters, but injuries happen in the NFL. You want good players behind them. I think Christian Welch is a good player. Um, I think the lack of true number 4 tackle behind Tom and Walker is where this crunch probably happened. Like, say, Glover or Telfort is uh, a solid fourth tackle to be behind the starters. Maybe Christian Welch makes it. I think he honestly, along with Anthony Johnson Jr., were probably the first two off the roster, unfortunately. But um, regardless, I think they got a good set of linebackers here with Walker, Cooper, Hopper, McDuffie, and Wilson.
Iola has a very interesting history of producing NFL players.
Yeah,
Dave Krieg. Do you know who Dave Krieg is?
I'll give you 3 guesses.
He's a quarterback that started for the Seahawks for. He's a three-time Pro Bowler. He's in the Ring of
What?
Honor. Yeah, he
I
played for
did
a long
not know
time.
that. I did not know that.
He's from Iola. The guy
I've
that
honestly
created
never heard of him.
the co-creator of NPR's Tiny Desk series is from Iola.
What?
Yeah. Also, Clifford Mishler. He's a numismatist and author. He used to be the former president of the American Numismatic Association, which is the study of coins. But I thought it was the study of Numac. Uh, sorry.
Oh,
Anyway, Christopher.
Jordan. That was bad, brother. That was not good.
Anyway, Christopher Welch, I'm sorry for making those jokes when we're talking about like you
You
not having
losing
a
your
job.
job?
Yeah, that's probably not the greatest time to do that tangent. Anyway, yeah, kind of a bad roster crunch for him. I think someone like Aaron Mosby wins out for his, arguably for his play during preseason games, but someone like Christian Welch doesn't. It's not an equal scale, but again, just numbers game here. They had five linebackers that they had already pretty settled. It was just a matter of what room was going to get more. And as I keep saying, this is just the initial roster. Someone, Jonathan Ford is going to return. They made that choice for a reason. Which spot is he going to win out? Is it going to be an extra O line? Is it going to be Aaron Mosby's? Is it going to be Brendan Cox Jr.? None of these guys are roster spots are safe throughout the year. And Christian Welch, depending on if he falls back in Green Bay or if he latches on somewhere else, could easily, show the Packers that they'll rue the day. Why do I keep saying rue the day that um they cut him because he
Yeah,
could be a quality NFL player.
I think he could. So, alas. Uh, moving on to the cornerbacks. Obviously, the four make it Jair Alexander, Keyshawn Nixon, Eric Stokes, and Carrington Valentine. Corey Valentine makes it, and that is the room. Kalen King and Robert Rochelle both do not make it. Jamon Green also does not make it, and LJ Davis was also put injured, waived. I'd assume is what that was. Um,
Yes.
but notably on Rochelle and Kalen King from Andy Herman. Of note on the cuts today, Robert Rochelle was not waived injured despite not playing with the injury in the final preseason game, so he would be eligible to go back on the practice squad with only five cornerbacks. That could be big, along with Kalen King, obviously. Um, I think that's probably, I don't want to say the right move per se, but I guess let's talk about the safeties with this, Jordan, because I think they go hand in hand. They end up keeping five safeties: Xavier McKinney, Javon Bullard, Evan Williams, Zane Anderson, which is a pretty big surprise, and
Yep.
Keaton Oladapo over Benny Sapp Jr. and Anthony Johnson Jr. So in total, they have 10 secondary players, and they let Rochelle and King go likely to the practice squad. I think mostly because they have safeties that can play slot corner now, and
Yep.
like that. Obviously, Keyshawn Nixon is likely the starting slot corner, depending on the package that they're in and everything. Um, but with Bullard showing that he can play it, with Evan Williams having success this season and or this preseason in his role, and then Keaton Oladapo invested a draft pick in the guy, showed some pretty good spots when he wasn't injured. I think they just kept four really good safeties, and then Zane Anderson makes it over Anthony Johnson Jr., which I think was a surprise to most of us, as just a pure special teamers guy, because that's kind of what Anthony Johnson Jr. was as well, but also had the ability to play safety quite well too. So um, I know Aaron Nagler had made a good point. It's like, yeah, why? Like, it's intriguing that we're keeping the pure special teams guy for a special teams unit that was ranked like 29th last year. Like, it's where's the value in that kind of thing if they're just not going to be a great special teams team or unit, I should say. Why not just keep the better position player? But again, at the end of the day, Anthony Johnson Jr. is likely not seeing the defensive side of the ball much this season, um, save for injuries. So you kind of have to juggle that as well. But yeah, 10 secondary players. I think that's. I mean, what did we predict? 4 or 5 safeties?
Five safeties for sure. I think we eventually settle on Rochelle as being the last man in
Yeah,
to make it six cornerbacks.
yeah. So that had
But
11.
this does kind of feel right, if I'm being honest.
Yeah, yeah. We had 5. Oh no, we had 11 corners. I'm sorry, 6 corners and 5 safeties.
Yeah.
So
So I again the Anthony Johnson Jr. Zane Anderson. I think that's very valid. It's every not all these roster decisions are made equally. That is very clear because you could make the well. It's like he has special teams value, or you could turn him into a special teams teamer, but also see the potential that he has. But then you also think back to Anthony Johnson Jr. and the fact that Packers drafted three safeties. They signed one of their marquee free
right.
agent decisions was another safety.
Yep.
When was he going to get on the field?
Uh huh.
That's the biggest key is that Keno Oladapo, Evan Williams for sure from what we've seen. Priority looks to be a better player. Anthony Johnson Jr. like it's not just a numbers crunch; it could also just be a talent crunch. So that's where the Zane Anderson part of they need special teamers. I get it, but I would have probably wanted Anthony Johnson Jr. there. But this is just where, again, not all decisions are made equally, and some input is valued in that regard. But I don't know. You can easily go back and forth of pros and cons of that one because I think even though he's a seventh round pick from last year, the four safeties that the Packers got over the overhauling their safety room outside of Zane Anderson, it, it's that might be the one that they long term miss out on. The immediate sense is obviously what's going to happen with the kicker because that will determine
Right.
just how far they go this year because of just how the margins play. But Anthony Johnson Jr. could be a guy that just plays for a very long time, even if it's around the league. But
Right.
I don't know.
Yeah. Um. Just round out the roster. Obviously, Daniel Will makes it. Matt Orzek makes it as well. Um, rounding out the special teams unit. Uh, Big streak ended today. 19 years in a row, the Packers kept an undrafted free agent. They did not keep one this year. But uh, Wes Hod.
Which
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I mean, obviously rookie, yes, but Aaron Mosby is kind of like, yeah, I mean,
Yeah, kind of like
he's
that
an
that role.
undrafted second rounder or second year player, I
Go
should
ahead.
say.
Well, that's what I was getting at. Is that
Yeah,
from last year? I think it was Emanuel Wilson. I just had the list up. I should just look at
it
it.
was Emanuel Wilson,
Emmanuel
Ben
Wilson.
Sims, and Malik Heath.
Well, no, that yeah, I think that they signed initially. Whatever it is. Malik Keith, Kadeem Telfort, um, Brendan Cox Jr., and Emmanuel Wilson. All 4 from last year make it this year. Like that's pretty incredible that they value those guys that high. That they've really made a name for themselves in camp. You know what I mean? Like
Mm-hmm.
they've proven that they can make it, and so good on them for doing it.
Yeah,
So, um, anything else on the cuts today, Jordan? I think I like the roster. There's nothing like super surprising about it. Obviously, again, we just spent 3 weeks talking about end of bench guys rather than the main starters and the all 22 and everything. But it's gonna be good.
I am excited for the start of the season.
Me too.
I will obviously keep my eyes peeled if any late additions are made, but I think our what we had talked about in the lead up to this day of competition depth problems. I think Brady Gutekunst is sharpening his roster decisions. A lot of the guys that we thought maybe would have a bigger leash to have to make the roster and maybe get some reps or just kind of get their feet wet. I mean, Michael Pratt, Sean Clifford are done for the time being. Anders Carlson is obviously the biggest one. There are just decisions today that I was like, oh, I feel like the Packers normally wouldn't have made it for this or that. Um, and again, the scale changes depending on the player, but interesting decisions to be made for sure.
Yeah, yeah, I'd agree with that. I'd agree with that. All right, folks, that does it for today's cut down pod. Thank you all for listening. We'll be back in your podcast feeds soon with our 2024 season prediction pod. And then next week is week one down in Sao Paulo as the Packers take on the Eagles. So we'll have that.
So, hello.
So we'll have that game prediction as well early next week. So keep a lookout on for that. So subscribe to Talk of the Tundra wherever you get your podcasts. Subscribe to us on Twitter at PackersGSPN. Maybe we'll do a couple of live tweeting the games this year. Just maybe we'll see how that shakes out, kind of thing. I know. At Numac Zone
Uno,
on Twitter.
dos,
At
tres, catorce. Did you know that was actually 14 in Portuguese?
it's also 14 in Spanish.
I know I had to make sure that I was not just being, yeah.
Right. At Jordan Chesky on Twitter as well. Go check out all of the pods and our premium content on Substack at gspn.info. Um, anything else? What is going on upstairs? Oh, it's a vacuum. My wife is vacuuming. I was like, what is going on? So, all right, folks. GSPN.info for the rest of the podcast information. Appreciate it. And Jordan, thank you.
Thank you.